welcome back. Daily Time with God. So glad you are joining us today on this Tuesday as we are studying the book of Proverbs together this month. Lisa, how's it going?
Going well. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I just told Lisa I just finished my annual review. We all get performance reviews, actually every 6 months, but this one is kind of like your end of the year. Our year functions from, July through June. Is that right?
Yep.
And so anyway, this one is like your end of year one. And usually everybody has a single boss. So like that, whoever your supervisor is. And then we have a group of elders. And so they're all my boss. And so I get feedback rolled up and get to examine how the last year went and what you're looking to do in the next year. And so it's a good process. I had really only ever had like one performance review when I got to Eastern Hills. And so I actually really like feedback. So it's helpful for me. I enjoy it.
That's good. That's good. And you could like frame it in what you're learning in Proverbs. So
that's right. Yeah, for sure. Exactly. Yep. And I could start drinking coffee about 2 hours before I usually do. And that's going to probably not pay off later. So I have so much. I have like a coffee appointment at 10:30 today. And I'm like, I'm going to be dead by then. So it's fine.
Well, you could be like me and you're drinking the McDonald's coffee that was in the staff kitchen.
Is it that like Winter Wonderland stuff?
No, it's not that. Thank goodness.
That's good. Well, what are you going to do? We all have a cross to bear today.
Yes.
Well, hey, so we are studying the book of Proverbs this month. It's been a really cool study so far. And the way that we're studying it is there are 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs, 31 days in the month of August. We're studying it on the weekend through this series that we're in right now. But then we're also reading together the chapter that corresponds to each day. So today we're reading Proverbs 10 together. We'll talk about it and break it down. There's quite a few verses today, so we may not get to all of them, but I really encourage you to read through it, even if we don't get to all of it today. And then in addition to that, it's also showing up with our kids ministry. They're learning a lot about Proverbs this month. And then we also have a reading plan that you can go find linked wherever you found this. And then if you're looking for a next step in general, you can find it at ehills.org/weekend. Last night was the first night of our new round of Cultivate. Lisa, how'd it go?
It went really well. It was fun. We had a couple of people online and then several people in the room. And it's fun to see people either reconnect or connect for the first time. We had so many people it was crazy. We had so many people this time who had been at Eastern Hills less than a year. This was kind of their first step into figuring out what's next for them here. So it was really fun.
That's cool. Well, thanks to any of you guys that signed up for that. Hopefully it's helpful. It really is kind of like this spiritual orientation at Eastern Hills. And so we find it to be really helpful when folks can get connected that way. Yeah. All right. So today we always ask a question of the day to get us started. Today, the question is, do you play or did you ever play a musical instrument?
All right. So here's the deal. Some people that have played several instruments, you're like, whoa, and they play them really well. I just played a lot of instruments because I was terrible at all of them. So piano, I started with piano. And then, of course, the recorder, you do that in third grade or whatever.
Yeah. That one
and then I played the violin for a summer until my mom said no. And then I played the clarinet, which she also said no to. And then I played the flute and the piccolo in middle school and high school. And then in college, I learned how to play the guitar because it was part of my elementary music class. You had to learn how to play the guitar.
Nice. That's good. Way to go. That's impressive.
And I play none of them today. So there it is.
Wow.
I never played any of them well, and I don't play any of them today.
I bet you could pick it up. I bet you could.
Funny.
All right. We'll say hi to some friends, see what they've got. Georgina, good to see you. Good morning. Glad you're with us today. Tex, good morning. Never have played an instrument unless you include the kazoo. Kazoo counts. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I include it. Yeah. Pam, good morning. Good to see you. Greg, good morning to you. Good to see you. Pam, I played flute and piccolo in high school. I feel like those are both actually kind of difficult instruments. Yeah.
You know what I love about them is they're played in the key of C, and so you don't have to transpose anything. Like what you see is what you get, which I appreciate.
That's good. Little insider tip from.
And I played the oboe too.
From an expert flutist, is that what you call it? Flautist. That seems inappropriate somehow. That word just feels sketchy. Greg, I took accordion and guitar lessons. It isn't fair to them to say I played them. That's funny.
That's amazing.
Joan, good morning. Good to see you. I played the clarinet Or I should say I attempted to play it. I was horrible, and everyone in my family made so much fuss about it that I quit after a semester. I bet you probably have an amazing clarinet talent if they would have just stuck with you. So I'm sorry about that. That's
this is why I say musical instruments are in for the long game.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Ron, good morning. No, I never played a musical instrument. Wish I could have played guitar or saxophone. Yeah, saxophone always felt like a really cool instrument to play. I play guitar marginally. Don't tell anybody. But saxophone was always one of those like very fun, seems really cool instruments. So I get that. Crystal, morning. Psh, I wish. I feel like, Crystal, if you set your mind to it, you could probably play any instrument you wanted. So
I agree. They say that the mathematics side of your brain and the instrumental side of your brain are together. So oftentimes, if you're really good at math, you can pick up instruments really fast.
There you go. Maybe that's why I'm so bad at math.
Good at math.
Yeah. Georgina played the clarinet. Very nice. Stacy, good morning. Good to see you. Glad you're with us. Sherry, good morning. I played the piano and took some lessons many, many years ago. Alyssa took lessons in piano since she was like 5 or 6. She's actually amazing at piano. And I always try to like get her to come play at church. And she's like not doing that. Never gonna do that. But she plays sheet music. So like the idea, if you put like just chords in front of her, which is how worship music is written, she's like, I wouldn't even know what to do with that. But I'm like,
does she still take lessons?
No.
Okay. I have a friend of mine who still takes lessons. She's taken them since same thing, like 5 or 6. And
yeah. Greer, our 11-year-old, takes lessons and he's good too. He's figuring it out. Linda, good morning. I played the piano. Steve said not really any. I have a praise. I played golf yesterday. First time since I injured my shoulder 16 months ago. I did okay. Way to go. That's awesome. Congratulations. I bet with a recovering shoulder, you still play better than I would play with a full healthy shoulder. So way to go. Well done. Jeanette, my family was very musical. My siblings played clarinet and flute, and I wanted to play trombone, but it was too much money. I played piano a little and sang. Look at that. Very nice. I could see Jeanette as musical for sure.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. Joseph, piano, flute, and mouth harp. What is a mouth harp? Do you know what that is?
Is that like a harmonica?
I don't know. Oh, it's this thing. Look at that. It's
this. I was way off.
Whatever that thing is. Look at that. Okay. All right.
Fun.
We see you, Joseph. We see you.
Got you.
Greg, Phil, what instrument did you play? I play guitar. When I was younger, I played trumpet. Recorder doesn't really count, but I played that. And then I think I've told you guys, I did like musicals and stuff and choirs and all that stuff. And so I learned enough piano to like lead rehearsals sometimes. So that's the extent.
That's pretty extended, Phil.
Sure. When you're in public high school and you do like Bible studies or like church group things, you eventually learn how to lead worship. And so I learned how to lead worship, and which means you really have to know like 4 chords. And so I really didn't advance much beyond that. I just led in a bunch of different places and times. And then I was in grad school, and I don't know if I've told you the story. My mentor in grad school was he was an interim pastor, like a pastor in between 2 pastors for a church. And he's like, hey, they're like 2 hours away. It's a military church. Would you come lead worship this weekend? And I was like, sure, yeah, I can come lead worship for you. That's fine. And he's like, all right. And so then he sends me an email, and it's like very elaborate. Like, here's when rehearsal is with the band. Here's when rehearsal is with the praise choir. Like, here's when you show up. And I was like, wait. How big is this church? 4,000 people.
No.
And so I show up with like my guitar case, and I'm like, I am so wildly out of my depth right now. And so we like get through the weekend, and at the end of the weekend, very sweet folks. They were like, oh man, we would love for you to be our worship pastor. I'm like, you don't. Like, I promise you don't. You like everything that I just did, that's all I have. That's it. Like there is no from here with me. So that was.
Oh my goodness. You're like, I could do those 4 songs again.
Yeah, if you want me to do those again, I could kill it again. But I think you probably want different set lists. Justin, good morning, everyone. Over on YouTube, I played trumpet and sousaphone. All right, still toying around with the trumpet. Very nice, very nice.
Okay, so there is this documentary on Hulu right now with Paul McCartney. It's so good. But we were watching it and we're like, what is that? It's like this teeny tiny trumpet. And Anthony's like, I think it's a piccolo trumpet. I'd never even heard of that thing before.
Look at that. See, we're learning new stuff. That's what we're here for, guys. We're here to help
So
you learn. Gloria over on YouTube. What's up, Gloria? I played the flute in elementary and as an adult. I think the rest of your comment got cut off. Stacy, violin and piano. Very nice. Norm.
Wait, you missed Buffy.
Oh, no. Oh, I did miss Buffy. That was actually on purpose, Buffy. I was trying to ignore you. Just kidding. Buffy, I play the vocal cords. Buffy has a killer voice. If you ever hear her like uncork it, you're like, oh gosh, I'm going to hide.
There it is.
It's amazing. Norm, have we heard from Norm before?
I don't think so.
Norm, if this is your first time, thanks for joining us. Percussion. Yeah, that's good. I really want to be able to play the drums. I just can't. If there was a way that I could do the same thing with my arms and feet at the same time, and that was called playing drums, I would do that.
Oh, for sure.
When it's like, all right, you do these different things with your hands and then different things with your feet all at the same time. Like, well, see that thing that's oozing out of my ear right now? That's my brain tissue. Yeah. So I can't do that.
I mean, I'm sorry if this is offensive, but I think chick drummers are the best because they're so few and far between. I could have said ladies, but
yeah. Female drummers.
Like if you're going to be a drummer, you're pretty much okay with that. So anyway, there's this lady that I follow on Instagram and she is amazing.
That's fun. Norm is new to the group. Well, welcome, Norm. So glad you're here, man.
He might not come back now that I called, was offensive.
Right. He's probably gone forever. If you ever want to check out any of our old stuff, man, you can go find us on our YouTube link. And there's hundreds of these, just like this, actually. Joan, in 2017, I purchased a beautiful electric acoustic guitar from the Keith Urban collection, and it came with an entire training set of DVDs. I never opened the DVD box. I need to start that one day. It's a dream of mine to play. I bet that's an amazing guitar.
I bet
you should totally do that. Leslie, good morning. I'm musically challenged. I made noise with the recorder in 7th grade. If that counts. That does count. And that's, what I say to my mom, and I'm sure I've said this too, anytime my mom and I are in church together, my mom cannot carry a tune to save her life. And she would tell you the same thing. And so I just lean down when we're singing in worship and I say, just remember, the Lord, he sees your heart. And then she has nails and she does this thing called chicken peck. And so she'll just pinch you like right here or like right underneath. And still worth it. Worth it. So
it's coming.
Yep. No, look at that, Ron. Way to go. Way to welcome Norm. You guys much you guys. Great job. I almost bought that set. I still want to learn how to play. You should just give it a shot. It's fun.
You guys could learn together.
You could. We could make a Daily Time with God band. That'd be fun.
Norm's here. I was going to say I'll be the drummer, but now we might have an actual someone that could actually do it.
Yeah, we don't want a chick drummer. Just kidding. Ron, Lisa, there's a woman drummer with the machine. She kills Pink Floyd. Look at that. I think that means kills in the sense that she's like really good. Right. Crystal, Jen Ledger is my favorite female percussionist. She's an amazing person. Well, there you go. Well, this is a great question, guys. Thanks for answering that. That's fun. I will say, if you ever have any good icebreaker questions, send them our way, because it turns out when you've done hundreds of these,
we're starting to run dry.
We're gonna start repeating some questions here in a minute. So it's probably helped me. My daughter, my 9-year-old, she is like Miss Conversationalist, so I could probably just ask her and she'd give me another set of hundreds of them. Right. But when Alyssa was out of town last week, I texted her. It was like 3rd day of being home with the kids without her. And I was like, all right, so Wells is like a firecracker that just like starts lighting off when he wakes up until he goes to bed at night. Like that, you're always on with them. And Maisie cannot, I don't think that she is physically capable of not talking. And then she just sent back like 2 laughing emojis. And then she said that she was getting a facial. And then she talked to me later. Well,
stop texting me.
Got it. Sounds good. That's hurteful, but I got it.
Good.
We made it.
Yeah, seriously, send us questions. I can't wait to see what we come up with at Christmas time because I feel like we've exhausted.
Yeah, that's true. We've had a couple of those now, so that's good. Well, hey, we are going to dive into Proverbs 10. Like I said, yesterday was really unique for Proverbs, where there was like this structure and there were 2 very concrete categories that actually related to each other. And if you were like, oh, this feels a little bit like when we studied Romans, don't get used to that, because that's pretty much the last time that happens in Romans or in Proverbs. And so today, as we jump into Proverbs 10, there'll be lots of helpful things, but they are much more in grammar world punctiliar in nature. They like happen in little bits and pieces. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you. As always, I'm going to read the passage. Lisa is going to bold some stuff. If you have questions, comments, all that stuff, drop in your stuff in the chat. But before we get there, Lisa, would you pray for us?
Yep. God, thank you so much for this time to continue getting to know each other, to laugh, and just to enjoy one another's company in such a unique way. I pray that you would continue to build this community, that we would encourage one another and build up each other. God, as we were reading today, give us wisdom. You talk so much about how wisdom is available to us, and all we have to do is ask. So we ask you for that right now. We pray that you would help us to understand. And God, that you would really, in each one of our hearts, speak to us and let us know what we need to learn from today and how we can apply it to our lives. We love you and pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right, here we go, everybody. Proverbs 10, beginning in verse 1, Solomon said, "The Proverbs of Solomon. A wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is a sorrow to his mother. Treasures gained by wickedness do not profit, but righteousness delivers from death. The Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the craving of the wicked. A slack hand causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. The memory of the righteous is a blessing, but the name of the wicked will rot. The wise of heart will receive commandments, but a babbling fool will come to ruin. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out. Whoever winks the eye causes trouble, and a babbling fool will come to ruin. The mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses." I'm going to stop there first. So like I said, if you were with us yesterday, I kind of queued you up to this, like in the structure of Proverbs, there's a couple things that we see. One is that early on, Solomon spends a lot of time kind of like making the case for wisdom. He personifies wisdom as this woman on a street corner that's like calling out, inviting people. Yesterday, then in Proverbs 9, there's this kind of chiastic structure between this woman of wisdom inviting people in to this place where she's built her home on these pillars of integrity. She's made some bread for you. She's made some good wine. And then it finishes with the woman of foolishness who is inviting you in. But what you don't realize, she's inviting you in to have stolen water, to eat with her, and to do that with a company of corpses of people that she's also brought in that have died from foolishness. So that was a little heavier yesterday. Today, though, we really get kind of this setup in verse 1, and then just kind of bullet pointed ideas about the way wisdom actually fleshes itself out. Yeah. So Lisa, as we start looking at some of these in the first handful of verses here, what stands out to you?
So like you said, verse 1 is kind of tying in where we've been and where we're going. And so it pulls in that idea of family. So we've got the mother and the father reference. And we've been talking about, up until this point, he's been talking about to my sons, right? Or to my son or my sons. And now we're kind of moving into a different place, but we've got this bridge that's bringing one into the other. But then we get into this first section, and it's really talking about the way that we're using wealth, and how the righteous would use wealth and how the wicked would. And the core here is kind of what's the motivation behind that. And wealth does not always mean monetary funds. Same thing with like food. Food does not necessarily mean physical food. Sometimes it's more of that spiritual food. And so when we look at like treasures and things like that, what we're talking about is more than just monetary. It's looking at what are the things that you value, what are the things that you crave, or what is your motivation behind getting those things? Is it because you recognize it's a blessing from God, or because you want more?
Yeah, that's good. Ben here says, verse 3, righteous will not go hungry, seems to conflict with Romans 8, where Paul talks about hardships like going hungry. I feel like Romans is a more complete picture of the life of faith, and this verse in Proverbs over promises. Yeah, so, and we've talked, that's a good call out, Ben. We've talked about this before. Proverbs, we have to do a couple things. One, we have to recognize the context anytime that we read a passage. We also have to understand that Proverbs are sort of kissing cousins with poetry. And with that in nature, it's not speaking about the direct, immediate, universal promise of, hey, if you're righteous in your life, you will never go hungry. It's saying this is in general the way that the world works. Now, there are contexts on both sides of the Romans 8 version and in Proverbs here. In Proverbs, you have the king of Israel talking about how it functions within Israel, within his immediate context of what it looks like for someone to follow God in a culture that's actually built for people to follow God as Jewish people, right? So that's one thing that sort of almost leans heavier into Proverbs 10. Then in Romans 8, you have Paul writing to a group of people where following Jesus is actually countercultural and even leaning into his own personal experience about like, hey, well, if you live right in this culture, it might be fine. Like it might actually work exactly the way that Solomon's talking about in Proverbs 10 to live in a culture that's counter to God for Jesus. There are stakes and consequences that come with that are different than just kind of the proverbial references that we see here. So I think that's a good distinction. You're exactly right. One is taking into account something that looks probably much closer to our current circumstances in Romans 8. And one is more this kind of like pie in the sky universality that I think is still directionally accurate in our life, but doesn't take into account the cultural pressure of following Jesus in a moment and a culture that does not. So
yeah, it's good.
On board. Ron, verse 1, a wise son makes a glad father. My son does make me glad and has wisdom as a young man. Not always, though. Yeah, well, I mean, he's a young man. We gotta make some foolish decisions every now and then. I'm sure he's doing it just so you know that he still needs you. I bet that's what it is. That's probably my guess. So yeah.
I mean, he's got to be sorrow to his mother sometimes,
Yeah. Sometimes just keep it going, And obviously nobody is universally wise and nobody is universally foolish. One of the things that I think becomes such an important guard for us, right, is sometimes the wisdom of a week ago, the wisdom of the last meeting I was in, the wisdom of whatever actually gives me pride. And then I step into another situation and self-justify showing up to that foolishly because of the resume of whatever I just did. I think that can be a blind spot for us.
That's really interesting.
Yep. And then we see really this isn't even necessarily saying like Solomon's not trying to say I'm making a moral case for these things. He's just saying like, this is the way life works. Right. And so we get into verse 4 and he says a slack hand, which is lazy, like a lazy person causes poverty, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. And I don't know about you, Lisa, but I feel like some of what I look around and see right now is I think that right now in our world, there's an expectation of, and this isn't like a political statement, but I think there's this expectation of I am entitled to everything, right? And what we're doing pretty consistently is we're like turning everything into a human right. That's like the buzz term. And so this idea of because I'm a human, because I exist in America, I should just instantly have this, and this. And I think Solomon's like, no, like if you want stuff, you should work for it. And I think that functions a little bit in contrast to the culture that we live in the middle of, and recognizing that what he's talking about here is not our salvation. That comes by grace alone, through faith alone, in Christ alone. This is about our temporal circumstances that actually is going to require effort from us for those to change.
It's interesting because when we first got married, we met with my parents' financial advisors. And my dad worked really, really hard. He started off in this company as just your base level engineer. I mean, he was out in the refinery in the yucky clothes and doing all the hard work, retired as a VP. And we got married and all we saw was my dad as that and the lifestyle that they lived as that. And I can remember Anthony being like, I don't understand why we're so far behind. It feels like we should be able to essentially like keep up with your parents. And I was like, Okay, and so we had this conversation with the financial advisor, and he's like, we are seeing this as a trend with your generation, that you are looking at where your parents are now, and you think that you deserve to live at that same level without the 35, 40 years of work to get there. And it was really humbling for us to recognize, like, oh, it's okay to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches on the floor because, all we could have right now is the little house that we live in. Like, that's okay. And so living within our means and then working really hard, and not to the point where you're killing yourself or neglecting the things that matter. But I think also recognizing that diligence is a lot of what Solomon's talking here. It's that diligence of continuing to work, continuing to work towards the things that matter. And that, I think it makes a difference too when you have that mindset.
Yeah, I agree. So then he says he who gathers in summer is a prudent son, right? This is about the seasons. This is this idea of like, how do we invest for the future? We know that there's going to be a time to go get it in harvest, right? But then he says, but he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. And if you don't know this about like farming, depending on the crop that you have, there's a specific season. You can't just go get it whenever you want it. Like, you have to get it really within a pretty small window of time. Otherwise, those crops will go bad and you won't be able to harvest them. And so it's this idea of like, are you diligent? Are you diligent about doing the work in season and out of season to get ready to actually reap the harvest? And even reaping the harvest requires effort.
Yeah.
Ron agrees with me, by the way.
When you think about that honor and shame culture that we're dealing with here in Solomon's time, you look at like, what brings your father honor? Well, it's being wise. And what brings shame to your family? Well, it's being lazy. And so I think that's just a really interesting twist there.
Yeah. Well, and what do we reward? Like, if you've got younger kids at home, like, do we reward diligence or do we reward laziness? And right around this time of the summer, I realized like how little our kids do at home in the summertime. And I'm like, oh, it's time to do some things. So last week, they were glad to see mom, but I was like, this is how we're gonna do screen time today. These are the things we're gonna get done around the house today. Like, you are a part of our family. We are doing this. And they're like, oh, when's mom getting back? Do the work. Becky, good morning. I think it's interesting that in verse 6 and verse 11 have the same wording. Blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. And then verse 11, the mouth of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence, right? And you're actually going to see one of those verses in my message this upcoming weekend. But it's not the only time that Solomon's going to talk about this. As a matter of fact, if we just think about, kind of like a word scramble of how many times we hear about out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Yep. And the good that can come from our words and the damage that can come from our words. Man, it shows up so often in the Bible, like so often. And for some reason, like, we just still don't get it. And so understanding, like, what does it mean for us to understand when it shows up that much? It's probably because we're all susceptible to it. It's probably because we can all trip up in it. It's probably because it's this, this idea of a fountain, right? It's like constantly pouring something out. What in your life is it pouring out?
And I think that's one of the things I appreciate about Proverbs is it is timeless. Humanity has not changed at all. The things that Solomon was seeing in his generation and with his children are the same things that we're seeing in our generations and with our children. And so I just think that's a fascinating just study on humanity, to see that even with all of the technological advances that we've made, the human heart is still the human heart.
Yep, for sure. And then blessings are on the head of the righteous, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. This reference that Becky just made. And then it says the memory of the righteous is a blessing, but the name of the wicked will rot. Tell us about those, Lisa.
Well, we constantly come back to this idea of this path of unrighteousness, this path of evil is leading us to death. And over and over and over again, like you said up front, Solomon's going to continue to drive this stake into the ground, because I think he just wants us to realize this is true. And this is what I'm talking about. And it's not unique to you, or it's not unique to this guy. It is general for all. If you are going to walk that path, if that's the way you're going to head, you are walking yourself to death.
Yeah. And the kind of legacy we're going to leave behind, this picture of what that's all about, right? Like sometimes I think we read these passages and we're like, yeah, but sometimes the unrighteous do prevail. Like, yeah, in the short term. But if you think about the like long-term legacy of what wickedness experiences, like every time that a name gets mentioned, even like after someone's gone, you probably have a family member that like when their name gets mentioned, they may be long gone. There's kind of like this just internal wincing that happens around because like that person was not a good person. And then there's maybe somebody that you guys instantly have memories and stories to talk about because they love you well and you love them well, and that's their legacy. And I think Solomon's saying if you want that one, it's about living a life that's characterized by wisdom at a very practical level. So
yeah, we went to a funeral a couple years ago and they invited people to come up and share fond memories. Not a single person got up. And it was devastating.
Ooh, yeah, that would be hard. Verse 8, the wise of heart will receive commandments, but a babbling fool will come to ruin. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I think this actually ties in really well with what we were talking about yesterday, but this idea that you need to be able to receive, if you are going to be wise, then a symptom of being wise is being able to receive feedback about who you are and kind of some of those blind spots that you have. The babbling fool, I mean, you think about what babbling means, it just means like you're saying all the words all the time without any thought that goes behind them. And what do those words lead to? Well, here Solomon says to ruin, other places he says to death.
Yeah. And then there's this picture of the kind of endurance and really the kind of durability of our life with integrity. He says, whoever walks in integrity, you're the same person in every environment. You're consistent. You can be dependent on. The person who walks in integrity walks securely, but he who makes his ways crooked will be found out, right? Elsewhere, we read this as, be sure your sin will find you out. And, I think there's definitely for Solomon a picture of like, eventually in this life, you will be found out. I'm not sure that's actually even always true.
Right.
I think that's one of those proverb things, but we understand that there's a divine judgment in eternity and that apart from Jesus, it doesn't matter what your good deeds are, your sin's going to be found out. The fact that you're not in Jesus is going to be found out. Like there is a call to a sort of eternal reckoning that I think when we read the New Testament back into this verse, we see.
Yep. And we talk with our kids about integrity. It's, hey, are you making the right choice even when no one's looking?
Right. Yeah. Who you are in the dark, that's who you really are.
Yep.
Verse 10, whoever winks the eye causes trouble, and a babbling fool will come to ruin. So this is just somebody that's lazy with their language. And I will say, I am somebody that winks at people, and people have quoted this verse to me, and I'm like, all right, so this is like a cultural reference about somebody that's like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We got a different thing going on. Trust me, we can be dishonest. That's not what I mean when I wink at someone. All right, let's just dial it back, everybody.
You're not doing the creepy wink, though, I hope.
No. Definitely not. And then we talked about this already. The man of the righteous is a fountain of life, but the mouth of the wicked conceals violence. It's not that the mouth of the wicked doesn't say anything. It's that it's deceptive, right? That we're just not being honest about what we think or feel, oftentimes trying to cause division, which leads into verse 12. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all offenses. Tell us a little bit about when we read the New Testament into verse 12, what you see there, ma'am.
Yeah, so I actually have written here 1 Peter 4:8, which I think is love covers a multitude of sins or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So Peter, who would have been one of Jesus's best friends, he is writing based on what he had learned from Jesus and then his experiences as an apostle, planting churches and sharing the gospel message across kind of some areas of Judea. He didn't go too far. And so it's one of those things where he is thinking about, okay, I know this passage in the Proverbs, and I know what Jesus came and what he said. And Jesus was like, hey, if you're going to love God, then that means you're going to love other people. You're going to be forgiving of people. Peter's like, how many times do I need to forgive someone? And Jesus is like, oh, always.
Infinite.
And so Peter, I think he's pulling it all together, and he's like, okay, I get it now. And so you look at this and you think, okay, what's the opposite of hatred? I don't know what Phil would say, but I would say love. I mean, that's what Solomon's trying to say here. And then he's saying hatred is going to do this. It's going to cause division. It's going to cause dissension. It's going to cause problems and anger and frustration. He uses this word strife. And then what is love going to do? Well, love is going to cover all of that. And if you are actually being loving of others, then all that stuff that's happening, it's not that you don't notice it, but it's that you're getting to a place where you're like, okay, I'm going to be able to forgive that. Forgive does not mean be okay with it, but it means that you are going to have a peace that comes about that, and healthy boundaries.
And I think that, this idea, the idea of extending love, it's not saying that when we extend love, there aren't offenses. It's saying that when we extend love, we're able to actually we're able to extend grace to those offenses. Offenses are universal. And so hatred seeks to use those offenses to divide. Love says, you know what, I can actually extend grace even when there are offenses. And I think we're really good at baptizing hatred and fear. We're really good. And so we never say, like, I hate that person. We say, I'm concerned about that person. We don't say, I'm fearful about this issue. We're saying, I'm concerned about this issue. But you got to look at the fruit. Look at the fruit of what your approach is creating. Are you able to look beyond offenses? Are you able to actually extend grace? Or are you like lighting the fire of every potential offense and causing strife? My hunch would be that there's some hatred and fear in you don't want to be honest about. Yeah. And so being able to recognize, look, this isn't just something I hope someone else extends to me. I do for sure. But this is also a call, not only in Proverbs, but the Bible itself, of what it means for me because of what Jesus has done for me to extend love to others. The New Testament says that we love others because God first loved us. Yeah. And so as a follower of Jesus, what does that do? It covers offenses. Sometimes we want kind of a cheap version of love where we love someone in our words, but we still call out every offense. We're still easily offended, right? In a way that here in Proverbs, I think, would say that this kind of love, and it's not even a full version of love represented in Jesus because Jesus hasn't come yet. Even this kind of love is supposed to cover offenses.
Yeah, I mean, if you're loving people the same way that you love your pizza, like we're missing something there. And so I would say too, heart check, how easily are you offended?
Yeah. Probably depends on how much Probably depends on how much you love pizza.
Well, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I do love pizza, so.
See? Although you have to eat gluten. Well. You have to eat gluten-free pizza, so.
Yeah. But I think that it's important for us too. Like if you find yourself, and I went through this very recently, I think coming out of, my counselor says I'm coming out of it, but it's one of those things where everything was setting me off. It didn't really matter what it was because I was so angsty all the time about stuff, and I wasn't processing through and dealing with some stuff. And so I was feeling easily offended pretty frequently. And so to do a little heart check there and be like, okay, why does that bother me? And then take it kind of moment by moment and figure out what's underneath that, because there's always something that's underneath that offense.
Oh, and it always has way more to do with us than it does the other person. And I say that as someone that probably very easily offends others at times.
Yes,
and they'll come back and be like, what did you mean by that? I'm like, I don't even remember saying what we're talking about. I'm so sorry. Like I promise it was not intended to be that way. Help me get better. I promise. Yep. Dom, I love verses 8-11, the benefits of striving for righteousness, filling the concept of evil succeeding. I go back and read Psalm 73, 16 and 17. When I thought how to understand this, it seemed to be a wearisome task until I went into the sanctuary of God. Then I discerned their end, right? Yeah, it is this picture of eventual judgment that is coming. We talked about this when we studied Romans. The reason that we don't seek a revenge or try to avenge ourselves is not because vengeance is bad or judgment is bad. It's actually really good. We're just bad at it. And so the whole point that Paul makes is like, yeah, don't do it because God's going to do it. He'll do a better job at it than you anyway, right? That's the picture. So then we jump into verse 13 here, where Solomon says, on the lips of him who has understanding, wisdom is found. But a rod is for the back of him who lacks sense. The wise lay up knowledge, but the mouth of a fool brings ruin near. A rich man's wealth is his strong city, but the poverty of the poor is their ruin. The wage of the righteous leads to life, the gain of the wicked to sin. Whoever heeds instruction is on the path to life, but he who rejects reproof leads others astray. The one who conceals hatred has lying lips, and whoever utters slander is a fool. When words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is of little worth. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of sense. We'll stop right there. All right, so obviously we're about to move into a section here that's really largely built around how we use our words. We talked a little bit about this for sure. Norm, by the way, said that's a problem I seem to have. I don't know when to keep quiet. Well, hopefully, as we look at some of these verses, right, Norm, I think you are in good company. I think it's easy for us to just feel like we need to talk, right? Is there a New Testament verse for you, Lisa, that when we read these words comes up into your mind?
I'm so glad you asked me, Phil. I have written right here, James 1:19-21.
Yep. What is that?
Well, is it be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry? Is it that one? Okay.
Yep.
Just because I write things down doesn't mean I know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think that, Norm, as you hang out with us, you'll hear us say that over and over and over again. There's a reason that James, who was the little half brother of Jesus, he says this because he knows how important it is for us to listen, be quick to listen. When we listen with the intent of hearing what the other person is saying and understanding what they're saying, then we are taking time to process that. We're taking time to think about it. It builds empathy. When we are then slow to speak, then that means we're not forming a response immediately. And when we are slow to become angry, that means that empathy is building in us, and that we're not triggered so fast, like I just admitted that I have been. And so it's one of those things where be quick to listen, be slow to speak, be slow to become angry. And our culture says, you don't need to listen because all you need to do is talk. The one who's talking is the one who's being heard. And so I think that's just it's just a great reminder. And I love that Solomon kicks it off here, and then James builds upon it.
And we are in a culture that incentivizes the exact opposite of the biblical model, right? Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. We are quick to get angry, quick to speak, and slow to listen, if we ever do.
Ever do.
And I think that every platform we have, whether it's the text thread, whether it's on a social media post, whether it's in a family conversation, the one who is the angriest and the loudest gets heard first. And that is a dangerous pattern for us to follow. And here Solomon tells us to a certain extent why. What are some of the consequences to the wrong approach of this that we see Solomon highlight?
Well, again, we see that bringing you to ruin. And he says that actually a couple of times. The gain of the wicked is sin. I thought that was so powerful. It starts off here in 16. The wage of the rightness leads to life. We talked about that. I think actually in Romans, we talked about that the wages of sin is death, right? Which means that the wages of righteousness is actually life. And so, there we have that juxtaposition of the two. But the gain of the wicked is sin. And like I just said, what's the wages of sin? It's death. And so it's all wrapping itself up together here. But then when you're listening to the instruction, when you're listening to knowledge, when you're listening to wisdom, again, your path is to life. When you are rejecting that reproof, then you're off on this path that is not leading you to the good things. And I don't know, there's just so much here. And then I highlighted a lot of like lips and mouth and tongue, because this all has to do with the way that we use our words. And I think that's just, again, we have to pay attention to what our words are. Because just because we think it doesn't mean it needs to come out of the mouth.
And there's a pattern for speaking. Solomon's not saying we never talk.
Sure.
He's saying that we're patient, that we gather the information, and then that we have the right conversation at the right time with the right people. And when we erode that, when we take pieces of that out and decide to go our own way, what Solomon says is there's consequences that are coming for that, right? This picture of the rod, that's a picture of discipline. Like, it is going to hurt. It's going to hurt relationships. It's going to hurt your reputation. You might not like this. It's going to hurt the way that God can use you. Like, you're going to create barriers for yourself that you just don't want. And so here we get this opportunity over and over again to pour life out with our words or to pour death out. And then he says, just in general, just a volume of words. He says, when words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips is prudent. We'll get to a passage probably at some point, unless it's on a weekend, where Solomon says, even a fool is considered wise when he remains silent.
Yeah.
Right. That there's this idea of, man, I'm telling you, you probably need to talk less than you do. You can probably listen more. Right. And so this idea that when we talk a lot, we're probably going to say something stupid. We're probably going to hurt somebody. And it's one of the reasons that, like, when we come on the internet and talk to you for an hour every day, and then I talk to you on the weekends, and a bunch of what I do is talking, there's plenty of times that my words get me in trouble because I say a lot of words, right? And I think for all of us, how do we just learn to go, you know what, I'm gonna demonstrate prudence, patience, self-control, right? Those are all things that I think the Holy Spirit of God wants to grow in us, and recognize that when I can't stop talking, there's probably some stuff that's thrown up in the wake of that I don't want.
Yeah. We have to tell the girls all the time, you don't have to say the last words.
Right.
Like, we can just be done with this conversation. It doesn't have to keep going. And they're just like, but I have more things. Like, I'm still offended. Yeah. I'm still angry. I'm like, same. We're done now.
We're not going to continue to talk about this. Becky, my brother-in-law, has a great saying, I'm not entitled to speak the first thought that comes into my head. Yeah, wouldn't that be great if we all just did that?
Man.
Like, wouldn't that just, I just think that what if we assumed that the first thing that we need to say, like that instinct, like, oh, I need to say this. What if we just assumed that first thought was incorrect? What would happen? Maybe it's correct, but like, we just assume, you know what, I need to do some work with that in my brain before I say it out loud, because I might be incorrect. And especially when we understand that the biblical model for how we use our words, being correct in my language or being correct in my information and incorrect or inappropriate in the way I share it, is still incorrect. And I think that sometimes we justify the wrong approach with what we believe to be the right opinion. I have a shirt that I'm probably going to preach in someday. I would love for it to be this weekend because it would go with the message, but I don't think it'll get here in time. But it just says, love your neighbor more than your opinion. And I think that, like, how would it change our words if we did that? Mm-hmm. I think it would. Buffy, if I'm not mistaken, there are 126-ish verses about the tongue in the Bible. Good times for someone like me. My therapist made me spend years on this topic. Yeah, I'd be surprised if it was only 126, but maybe that's true. Liz, I have a reminder on my letterboard in my kitchen that says, listen to hear to learn to love. Good for all of us. Absolutely. It's good. That's good. I don't have a letterboard in my kitchen. So Alyssa did a hand lettering thing on the side of a coffee maker that says, if it doesn't have meat, it's a snack. And it's a Ron Swanson quote. So that's our default.
I don't know if you still have it, but you used to have a letterboard next to your TV.
Yeah, we do. That's true. We have that one. That's probably a Michael Scott quote.
Yeah.
Michael Scott, The Office, Parks and Rec. We have one in our bathroom downstairs that says, just poop in, you know how I be. And that's a Michael Scott quote from The Office. So if you're wondering. We have spiritual stuff too, but
those things.
Those things. Yep.
I will say, I was reading this morning and I was a little tired. My eyes were really bothered by we had our window open last night. So the smoke, I think, was getting to me. But in verse 20, it says the tongue of the righteous is choice silver. I read that as choice liver.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I was like,
I don't want that.
That doesn't sound appealing, but you have to think about Solomon's time and everything.
Context and no, silver. Choice silver.
Yeah, it felt better.
Isn't that interesting though, that it would be that valuable, right? And it says the heart of the wicked is of little worth. That's like so deeply personal. Like the
Yes.
tongue, not even the heart, the thing
Yep.
that the heart flows to, the tongue is choice silver of the wise. But for the wicked, not even their heart has value. And you're like, oh gosh, like that
Right.
is. And for Solomon, remember, he will consistently give you these categories: wise, foolish, evil.
Yep.
Wise, foolish, evil. And I've talked about the book Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud, where he talks about how our approach with each one actually is different when we reflect on and think about it through the lens of the Bible. And then verse 21, the lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of sense. So the righteous person not only provides for their needs, but their righteousness and wisdom actually helps others. And the wicked actually, it doesn't even help them. Like they die because of lack of sense. And actually this term, lack of sense, you'll see show up a bunch of times throughout Proverbs. And that's the way it gets translated mostly. If you translate it from Hebrew, and there's ways to like do a direct translation that's a little bit more awkward, but I think has some interesting weight in our language, which would be instead of lacking sense or lack of sense, it would be mentally deficient. And so you go like, I don't like how that feels, but he's like, you just don't have the kind of common sense. Like not all the pistons are firing, man. Like you should know better than what you're living. And I think that's a big deal. So
common sense. And then I think with that goes self-awareness, right? We talked about that a little bit before, that wisdom builds automatically, it builds self-awareness. And so that's good.
For sure. I love getting to know you too through these videos. Lisa eats sandwiches on the floor and Phil has poop quotes from The Office around the house. Yeah, sure. Yeah. But Lisa, you don't eat peanut butter sandwiches on the floor anymore. You have a kitchen table. I've seen it. But you do still eat.
We only eat peanut butter sandwiches at the Rockies games now.
There it is. That's it. 2 days ago at the I saw Anthony and I was like, you bring in the sandwiches? And he's like, you know it. And I was like, yeah, bro, like
he made one for Macy Hummus who came with us and she's like, I brought my own food.
Yeah, I'm gonna not eat that.
I'm gonna pass on the PB&J.
That's amazing. Meanwhile, my kids are like, we're gonna go get some nachos because we're at a baseball game. So good. So good. Hey, look, Kelvin's with us. What's up, Kelvin? Good to see you, buddy.
This is like, now my day is made.
Yeah, that's
and
awesome.
I'm a little nervous now.
Yeah. All right, and then we get through. Let me just read a few more of these verses with what we have time with. Verse 22, the blessing of the Lord makes rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. Doing wrong is like a joke to a fool, but wisdom is pleasure to a man of understanding. What the wicked dreads will come upon him, but the desire of the righteous will be granted. When the tempest passes, the wicked is no more, but the righteous is established forever. Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who sent him. So that's where we'll stop today. You have another 11 verses or so in this chapter you should go read today. But as we finish those handful of verses, Lisa, with our time today, what stands out to you?
Well, actually, I want to hop. I highlighted it. You can see it. I did want to pull that one up because we've been talking about it. What is the fear of the Lord?
Yep.
And so if you've been tracking with us, I think this is our fourth one now, but the fear of the Lord prolongs life. And so we've been talking about that essentially all morning and really this whole time in Proverbs. But what is that leading toward? It's leading towards life. And so fearing the Lord, having this honor and reverence of God is leading us towards life. I think it's interesting because I said it and I didn't even think about it. Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes.
I know, I thought of that. Yeah.
And you think about what are those two things? Well, those are irritants. Vinegar rots the teeth and smoke irritates your eyes to the point where it can be hard to see and process words, right? And so when you think about, okay, well, what does that mean in the context of everything we're reading? Well, it goes on. He's talking about the sluggard, like this lazy person, again, like the foolish person. Like that's what that person is like to the people around him and or her. So I think that was just interesting, kind of pulling it all together, especially when you look outside and you're like, yeah, I see how that works. But I just think doing wrong is like a joke to a fool, but wisdom is a pleasure to a man of understanding.
That just feels like such a damning statement.
It really does. And you think like a lot of these, he's kind of flying up here and you're like, oh yeah, I get that. That makes sense. I see that. Blah, blah, blah. And then you get to this one, you're like, well, that's just a gut punch. It's like a cheap shot. And at the same time, it's so true.
Right. Like, And if you've ever had a conversation with somebody where it's just felt like, dude, life is like a joke to you. Like, what is going on?
Yep.
And I remember I used to sit with students, and I just felt like in general there were lots of students that like they don't know how to put all those filters on to like show, oh, I have it all together. Like they just don't do that. It's one of the reasons that I love students actually. But it was also the thing that like you would sit with a student and you're like, oh my goodness, like what are you doing, bro? Where do you think this is going to take you? And it really was. It was like, oh, this is all a joke to me. It doesn't matter. And it's like, well, you got to understand, man, like it's going to be really difficult for you, right? And so in verse 25, when the tempest, when the storm, when the difficulty passes, the wicked won't even exist, right? And so obviously Solomon is talking about that in like a big major event in the moment. We can think about that in terms of eternity, right? We can think about that in terms of like heaven and hell, eternally with God, eternally separated from God. But he said the righteous is established forever, right? Now, the misnomer here is the righteousness that's established forever actually isn't found in our wisdom. It's found in God. But he's talking about a durability, even in our regular day-to-day decision-making.
That's good.
Do you see this? That's so sweet. Georgina, thank you so much for starting my day with my beautiful Eastern Hills family. I miss y'all so much. I can't let go of you. Never let go of us, Georgina. We're not letting go of you. Good to see you.
Right.
Thanks for joining us today. Well, we're going to spend some time doing application. Like I said, I know that we have not gotten through all of this. I apologize. There's a lot of verses in some of these Proverbs. So feel free, keep reading. If you want to just click on this document even and just do some reading, you could do that way. But as we jump into application, Lisa, how are you thinking about and applying these Proverbs today?
Yeah, well, today the ones that stuck out to me is the way that we're using my words. The way that I use my words. And I can't remember if you said it or if I just thought it in my head and then you were like, don't say it because maybe it's not right. But out of the mouth, the heart speaks. That is true. And so what is my mouth speaking and how is it reflective of my heart? And how are we using our words to be deceptive? Because that's also coming out of your heart.
Yeah. I think the question, right? What deception lives in my heart that I'm using my words to export and lie to others about? Sometimes we're deceiving this direction because we've been deceived this direction, and we're just trying to manipulate the situation. And the answer to all of it, right, is to know and speak the truth. Right. But it comes back to like I gotta look inward. Sometimes we want to do all this cleanup of what we say, but if all we do is change the words that come out of our mouth and we never look at our heart, it's only a temporary fix. I like to call it a Band-Aid on cancer. It's coming back. We got to deal with what's going on at the root. So, yeah. And then I just said, like, I think in my life, my challenge is to talk less. Like, this idea of just because I think it doesn't mean I need to say it. Like that's a pretty consistent challenge in my life. Yeah. Because I think lots of things, it's easy to say them, but just because because they're true doesn't mean I need to say them. And are they helpful? Are they kind? Like asking those kinds of questions, I think as diagnostic tools, it's easy to know that. I think it's important as a reminder when I go through Proverbs to like actually walk that out. So
we've talked about that before when it comes to like the way that we post on social media.
Yeah.
Isn't there like an acronym that goes with that?
There is. I think I shared it.
You have. I just forgot it.
I don't have it memorized, so I can't help you.
It's something about helpful is one of them.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. All right. If there's ways that we can pray for you, please drop that into the chat. We'd love to be able to do that. Crystal, you gave a sermon with the acronym THINK. Yeah. I think that's true. Is it true? Is it helpful? I don't remember necessary, kind. I don't remember but yes, that's the acronym. That's the one. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. Slow to speak, roll it around in mind and heart a bit before opening mouth. Yeah. Dom has told me that I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and I should use them in that proportion. So same kind of idea. There you go. Is it important? There it is. There it is. You guys get it. Get it.
At least they listen to you, Phil.
Sure. That's fair. Yep. It's good. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to pray here in just a minute. Like I said, if you have prayer requests to drop in, please feel free to do that. But really appreciate you joining us for this series. Oh, we got one from Eileen. Hold on, everybody. Wait a second. Eileen, so sorry to keep coming back to this, but I'm slow to the uptake. No, you're not. And the difference between promises and principles for wisdom. For example, in Matthew 11:28-30, Jesus says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." If we take this as a promise, which I believe it is, then that should always be true. But Jesus' yoke isn't always easy and light. And he even says following him will be hard, for the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life. The reason I am stuck is, for me, principles seem optional. So could reading Proverbs be seen as similar to reading books like Seven Habits of Effective People? They're great guidelines, but they're not necessary. You pick and choose what works for you. But I believe everything in the Bible is necessary and true, even if things don't always turn out exactly as we interpret it as promise. Perhaps the way I'm thinking of principles and promises is off. So sorry if I'm slow on this. Well, so no, you're not. And I think that there is a challenge in the way we think about, like, what Jesus is talking about is how we pursue God. And he's contrasting a religious system where people were trying to get to God on their own. So when he says, my burden is light, my yoke is easy, he's talking about his specific approach, his specific teaching, the rules that he asked those who followed him to follow. He's saying that is easier than the external rules that other people were asking their disciples to follow. That's what Jesus is talking about. Now, when we look at Proverbs, we always have to ask, when we read things like this, are they descriptive or are they prescriptive? When we look at lots of things that Jesus talks about or we see in the New Testament, they're very intentionally prescriptive. The way we can see that in Greek is that it's something called the imperative. We know that that's a command when it's that way. Now, when we look at that in Hebrew, it's a little bit more subtle. And when we look at Proverbs, like I said, even today, I think these are principles, not promises. These are not always universally immediately accurate. This is generally the way the world works, which tells me this is more about descriptive than prescriptive. This is Solomon saying kind of the way that things work. I also think it's important for us. It would be interesting to take Proverbs and go kind of, what are the overall themes? We talk about when we did our series on studying the Bible, we're looking for these timeless principles. And if you looked over the course of Proverbs and you just separated them up into 8 or 10 different categories, right? Today, a bunch of it would be around our words. To go, what are the principles that we would find, not necessarily at the individual proverb level, but like, what are the principles about how we think of our words? And I would say you will see wild consistency between the principles that Solomon describes in Proverbs and the promises and commands that the Bible prescribes in the New Testament. And so I think that it requires some work for you to have maybe some of that kind of unity or compatibility that you're looking for, but hopefully that kind of breadcrumb trail makes sense.
Well, and I would say for anyone that wants to kind of track that down, Phil, yesterday you dropped in 7, and I'm not sure what you called them. They were kind of those 7 pillars that
7 pillars or whatever. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I can go back to that and try to drop that in the notes here. But if you're like, well, what are those principles that we can look at that are those overarching themes throughout the book of Proverbs? I think that would probably be a good place to start.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. All right. Well, guys, this has been a great conversation today. Really appreciate it. Tomorrow, we will be back on Wednesday for Proverbs 11 because it's August 11th. See what we did there? So feel free to read ahead if you want. Definitely go through and finish reading the section that we started today, if you're reading along with us, and go grab this reading plan if you want, maybe even a diagnostic question today of what attributes has God given to the righteous. There's your question for today. But before we go, I'm going to pray for us. Really appreciate your time today. Thanks to Norm for joining us for the first time. Thanks to all of our regulars. Love seeing us continue to grow, not just in our knowledge, right? But Proverbs is such a helpful book to remind us that it's not just about knowledge. That's kind of the whole point of Proverbs, actually, that knowledge without applying it isn't wisdom. It's just pride. And we want to walk this stuff out in our life. And because of Jesus, we want to walk it out empowered by the Spirit. So let me pray for us. God, thank you so much. Thank you for this group. Thank you for your word. Thank you for the truth that it has in it, that God, it is all equally inspired. It is all equally infallible, and measuring out how do we apply each part of it, especially when we come to different genres and themes. God's just such a good muscle for us to develop and learn about. Pray that we would continue to be faithful to do that today. We do pray for Alex today. Thanks so much as they celebrate his birthday. Pray for many, many more years for him and Leslie. And just thank you so much for the gift of their family. We pray for the symptoms that Pam is continuing to struggle with and looking for answers to and treatment with. We ask you for your healing in that. And we do pray for Joan's personal pain and the needs inside of her own marriage, that God, you would pour peace and comfort and healing there. And really more than anything, God, even as she waits, just hope. That what sometimes feels maybe inevitable doesn't have to be. God, we love you. We thank you so much for the time that we get to be together today. We ask that you go before us. It's in Jesus' name. Amen. Awesome, guys. Well, hey, Norm's coming back. Great. Glad to hear it, man.
Yay.
Good to see you. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Till then, have a great day and God bless.